cool.
So wait, you were educated in architecture?
Yes,
right?
very much.
For bachelor's?
Bachelor's, yes. Yes, I went to school. I mean, I went to school for computer science. And then I like kind of switched over. It's a weird thing. I don't know. I mean, because you're like 17, you take all the, you know, it's like you're going to college. You're like, I was in the Bay Area. Computers are really a big deal.
What is your life decision at the age of 17?
I was like, this seems like a good idea. I'm into computers. I took the tests, did pretty good, got to a good school, you know, and I'm like, okay, this is great.
Berkeley was the school?
Berkeley was the school, yeah. But yeah, after a while, as you go longer in the CS department, it sort of like gets really crazy. I just remember having a really hard, like, it was like the third weekend. It was already so gnarly. And I started taking architecture classes just because I wanted to take this 3D modeling class that was in the architecture department. I thought I wanted to work in special effects or something. So I grew up in like near Lucasfilm, also like up in the North Bay. I always drive by it, and I just loved movies and sci-fi and like all that shit. So I was like, that would be cool. But yeah, I just like looked around. I was like, damn, I'm gonna work with these dudes like for the rest of my life. Everyone's really unhelpful. It was like super competitive, and it smelled like Mountain Dew and feet.
Taco Bell.
It was like,
feet.
Yeah. So that was kind of like, is this happening? I don't know. I probably should have stuck with it, to be honest. But then it's like I took the intro class, you know, like the first like survey class, just to like to do the prereq, and then I was like, damn, this is kind of cool, because I hadn't seen a lot of. I always liked spaces and buildings, I realized, but I hadn't really like had any books or anything, you know. It's like my first exposure to it, really. So then took another one, then it was like I was doing a core design studio and like some heavy CS stuff and like discrete mathematics, and everyone's Russian, and I was like, this is just nuts.
Everyone's Russian? Yeah,
it's like, I mean, once you get up there like in the CS and math department in Berkeley, it's like all your instructors don't speak English as a first language, kind of, and it's like, it's just very much like math only, which is cool. It's universal, it's great, but it's
but also, I mean, at Berkeley is a really high ranked school, high ranked program, super intense place, big campus. It's pretty gnarly.
And I realized I was probably like, I did okay, you know, in retrospect. I was like, I was in there, you know, but you know, the homework got crazy. It was like, they like give you like this 2 lines of, you know, math, and it's like a big proof, you know, and like I would write like mine in like 2 pages or something, and then some dude would come in and did it in like 3 lines, you know. And I'm like, okay, these guys are like actual super geniuses. But yeah, and then the architecture thing, ended up getting a bachelor's. So
around second year, you were like, let me try this architecture class, this 3D modeling class.
Yeah. And then I just had to make a decision because it was just way too much work. I thought I would maybe try and do both, but I didn't want to stop doing the studio stuff, you know? Like I wanted to kind of see where that went. And I was like, I don't know, I almost got a minor in CS, but I also realized I didn't really want to write the code. Like I wanted to use the tools, and I wanted to be creative and design and do that stuff. I think I was just kind of confused about like where my place was in the CS zone, you know. But yeah, I mean, I started working kind of immediately. I got an internship at an architecture firm. I started working when I was still an undergrad, and then this was like kind of a while ago. This was like the .com 1.0 was like pretty like going like on the slide pretty hard. Like the bubble would burst, and people, you know, when I first got to the CS department, there'd be people that would just grab you with a clipboard. They'd be like, hey, what's your name? What classes are you taking? It's like, do you want like a 6-figure job and a car? And it's like people would just drop out of school and go work.
Wow.
And then they kind of like I lived with a dude like this. It's like one of my roommates, and he would always get fired or like just quit, you know, his like startup jobs. Like he'd get fired for insubordination or something, and then get hired the next day with a raise, you know. It's like, it was crazy. Pretty like, it was rampant. All that stuff was happening. So he eventually went back to school and finished, but yeah, the clipboards just like stopped showing up one day. They're sort of like not as aggressive anymore. So I was working for years. Like I worked in architecture for a while, and then graduated, and then I moved to New York pretty much right away. I worked there for a few years.
Wait, so what years were you in New York?
I think I went in maybe like 2002 or something.
Okay.
So I had interned there like pre 9/11. Actually, I spent like a summer there, which was kind of crazy, like in the year of 2000, I think. And just kind of fell in love with it and wanted to go back. I did. I already knew Dong, and he brought me to some gallery opening. He's like, oh, I'm working for this guy, and he left Zaha's office and like just started his own firm. He's like, you should meet him. So then I just go meet this dude, and he's like, oh, your friend tells me you're good, you should come by the studio. And I come by, and he's like, Illustrator, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, can you help with this? He's like, I can't figure this thing out. So I sat down, like literally started working at this dude's house, and then that was kind of it. Like, so I got a job like the second day in New York, and then just did that for years. And
it sounds like that's what would happen if you're hanging out with Dong, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, pretty much. But it was great. I mean, it was good time to be there, I think. I don't know.
How long did you stay there?
I think I moved to LA maybe 2008.
Oh, so you're there for a good chunk of time?
Yeah, I was there for a while, and then I was kind of back and forth for a while after that. But I've been kind of based in LA since then.
And what was the reason to move to LA and not stay in New York?
I mean, I think it was, I ended up going back to school. And in that time, I sort of, I was working, had been working for a long time at bigger and bigger firms, and you kind of like try and do the boutique-y thing. I was working for that dude. And then I worked with Thomas Lacer for a while, who's kind of a contemporary of Dylan Scaffidi. I don't know if you guys are familiar. Leaser, L-E-S-E.
Yeah.
So he does like really cool,
kind
of like single surfacey, like, interesting progressive stuff. But that was crazy. We were working on this project, the Museum of the Moving Image. It was like, I think they won the competition in like early 2000s, and they were still working on it. And it was like pretty small office with a pretty big project, and like all these different project managers would come in and out, and it was gnarly. It was like the classic, like New York architecture grind. Like everyone's kind of like a little frazzled, stay there late, you still go out sometimes, like you come back in the morning, you're just like
so you like worked at architecture firms legitimately for 4-6 years or whatever it was.
At least. And I feel if you include the time before that, I had like part-time jobs when I was in school and stuff. So did the thing. A lot of AutoCAD. A lot of AutoCAD. Got right in there. So that's cool. But yeah, I think like when I went back to school, I actually left that job to go back to school because I was like, I had other friends who were kind of doing it, and I'd go visit them up at Columbia, and I was like, man, this is kind of, I was just burnt like on this thing. I think there was some huge redesign, like some project manager came in, they're like, yeah, we have this really beautiful slender tower. He's like, what if it was just like one story? Like, can we just redo it so it's one story? We just want to see. We just want to see, like, what that would cost. And I was like, well, dude, no.
I'm out.
This is crazy. Like, we can't do this.
Yeah.
So then I was like, maybe school. And I did the application super quick. I just like, I remember it was winter. I think it's like at the end of the year, right? You have to submit November or something. I was living in Dumbo in this weird loft with this like older lady who was never there. And I would just like order pizza. And I just like crank the thing out in like a couple weeks and then just send it in. And yeah, so I ended up going to Columbia. Don probably talked into that too, actually. I was looking at some of the other like Ivy League schools, but it seemed a little weird. I don't know. I was like, but I like being in the city because I was like, that was still my dream. I was like being in New York and working. It felt more like going to work or like an office or something because you're still like in the fabric of the city and stuff. So, well, I mean, if you go to Yale, you're where is it? New Haven. Yeah, not a very big place, I don't think. No, but it's just like you're on campus and everyone's like so stoked on being at Yale, which is great. It's a beautiful thing, but. I don't know. I wasn't really resonating with me as much. So you went to Columbia for a degree. Did that. And then, that was kind of an interesting time too. So like in that sort of, in my New York time, I feel like my, a lot of my social sphere was kind of like caught up in the art world. So like, I had friends who were artists, like all, would go to like all the openings in Chelsea and like drink free beers and just hang out. I don't know, like all my friends would do that. Like that was kind of like the social thing. It would like kind of not revolve around it, but that was a big component of it. Like going to see art or like, doing the openings and being around it. That I think was more exciting than whatever was the discourse in the social life of architecture at the time. Right. Just because it's so like broad, I think in architecture, you'd be like, hey, do you want to go to this like KPF like holiday mixer? You're like, I don't know, maybe not really, but check it out. But the art thing was pretty cool and it was happening. I don't know. I think it was a good time in New York to be doing that. I think there's a lot of cool stuff around that. So I don't know. Like I had, I actually skipped a year in Columbia. I did 2 years because it wouldn't give me any financial aid. I was like, I heard that this like it could happen, so I like kind of petitioned them to just take a year off instead of financial aid. So I went into the second year of the 3-year program, and then so I had this summer in between. I wanted to do something a little different, so I met this artist actually at a party. Again, this guy Doug Aiken, shout out Doug. who was doing really cool work. I'd seen a show of his at PS1, and it was sort
the
of
name
like,
sounds super familiar.
He did, I think, I mean, there's some stuff I worked on for him, probably in the thing I sent you, but he did these like kind of large scale projection installation things, you know? So his whole thing was like creating this architecture, but like the moving image was part of the architecture, you know? So it's sort of like, how do you create a feeling of, you know, this dynamic environment just through editing and the captures of images and all that stuff. So that was cool. I mean, that conversation to me was really interesting. And then I think I went to this book release party my friend's band played at, and he's like, oh, you like art? You should come check out this. I'm playing this art party. I was like, cool. And it was a release for this book that he had put out, and it was all interviews. So, but he was interviewing Rem Koolhaas, like Jacques Herzog, like all these like heavy duty architecture people, because he was just really into architecture and wanted to have these conversations. So I was like, damn, this is perfect. This dude's really into architecture. And I don't, you know, so we just got to chatting, and he told me he was working on something for the MoMA in New York. It was a big installation. Literally, I was helping my friends load amps into the back of the van, and he just was really nice. He came around and like thanked everyone and like helped a little bit, and I was like, oh yeah, I just saw that you know, Rem Koolhaas, like great into architecture. He's like, yeah, I'm doing this thing, you should totally check it out, I should work on it or whatever, like keep in touch. Yeah, but he actually followed up, ended up like interning for free, which is insane. But I think I was like, I already had this like student debt. I was like, whatever.
Yeah, between Boston and Columbia.
How bad could like a couple months of this be?
That's true. Yeah, fuck it, why not?
I was like, but it was great. And after that, it was such a cool experience that I don't know. And then I was kind of like, did my last year, and everyone was sort of like interviewing, Dillerska video, and like all these you know, going to do the rounds and interviewing and stuff. I was like, I don't know if I can. Like, I want to do that right now, you know? And I had a friend who was in LA and did some kind of production. He had this, like, I don't know, he went on some tour and he couldn't rent his house out. And he's like, you come stay at my house, like, whatever. I didn't mean to move to LA. It sort of just happened. Like, I just came to, we had this conversation. He's like, yeah, just chill out and think about it. And, you know, I just went for 2 weeks, and that turned into like a month. And then Doug hit me up. He's like, I don't know if you're around or if like you'd be down to come to LA, but I've got this thing. I was like, I'm actually here randomly. Let's meet up. And that turned into a whole thing. I just never left. I like hung out for too long. I got kind of stuck in LA a little bit.
That's funny. Wait, so the degree at Columbia was for architecture or something?
Yes.
Wow.
The MArch.
That's so interesting that you would like pursue an MArch, but you know, it seems like pretty for a while had like one foot kind of into other things maybe. Yeah, I mean,
I didn't really mean to. I really did think I was going to pursue it and then get my license and start a firm and do the whole thing, which is not what I'm doing. I just don't think I'm ever going to get my license at this point. But yeah, I think also the education, like the grad school education. I don't know if you guys have done the whole thing or what, but
my grad degree is not in architecture; it's in urban design.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like it's I took like the weirdest studios that you could take. You know, there was like the Hernan Diaz one, or it's all like everything's like goopy and strange. It's like, I don't know. Like I see SciArc and people are just making like furry blobs now, and I'm like, this is cool, but I'm like, all right. But then it's like, if you come from somewhere else and that's your school experience, and you get out of school and you're like, who's going to hire me to make the furry blob? It's like, it's a very small list of people. So I was like, true. I just went crazy in grad school, and then that experience was amazing, but you're sort of like, I already knew kind of what the landscape was like because I'd worked, you know, in the field for a while. So I'm like, I don't really know if I'm going to, you know, it's like, do you do the boutique-y firm that doesn't pay well? Yeah. And then for how long? And then what's, you know, this decisions to be made.
Yeah. And then New York is it's a big city, but also really small in some ways, especially like the architecture community. For and, you know, if you're going to the top rated programs and you're pretty hardcore about things, you know, there's only a handful of offices really that you're going to want to apply to or think to apply to, and everyone's going to the same place. They're making the rounds, just as you said, like DSR, for sure. I don't KPF to corporate route or whatever. Yeah. They're all, it's the same thing. And of those like 10 variables, if you don't really see, you know, a whole lot of interest for you in one of those 10 variables, and that's kind of like, well, what do I do then? You know?
Yeah. I had this other thing where I was like, you know, when I was in this like art, this like summer, I was like, I really want to do something in fine art. Cause like you go to shows where the production is really nice and these objects are clearly not, you know, the work of one person. Like you traditionally, like when you're a kid, you're like, oh, this guy's painting stuff in the studio and it's really romantic, but you see like this incredibly huge show of like all this big stuff, you know, like who's making all this stuff, you know,
who
like,
gets credited for making it.
Yeah. And then I think the commercial part was like really taking off at the time. I mean, it has been a big thing for a long time, but I think just in the public eye, like people were starting to become aware of like, you know, how much money was trading hands, and it was a cool scene. You'd see like, you know, celebrities and other people like kind of around it. I think it was just like starting to get more shine, be much of a less of an insider's kind of thing. But I don't know. I just I remember like being in a cab one night and going uptown, and someone's like, oh, it's Jeff Koons's studio, that little dumpy like white building like right there. And I remember like I was like riding my bike like a couple weeks later. I rode by it, I turned around, just like knocked on the door for some reason. This dude, it was a Sunday, some guy was there all frazzled, and he's like, I was like, what's up? I was like, I don't know, I'm just, you know, I'm just like, my friend told me this is the studio, like I didn't know if you guys need any help. Like I'm in grad school and I have a summer, like I don't know if that's a thing. He's like, oh, are you a photorealistic oil painter? I'm like, no, not exactly. But he rattled off a bunch of stuff, and they were doing like these 3D scans. He's like, oh, do you do like 3D, like whatever? I was like, yeah, I can do that. Right. But he gave me a tour of the studio, and I just remember like being blown away because it was so much nicer than any architecture studio I'd ever seen. And I'd like been to Herzog and de Meuron in Basel and like some other places, and I was just like, whoa. It was cool, but it was like very professional and like very serious and very beautiful and clean and like insane. And that kind of hooked me a little bit. I was like, what is up with this? Yeah. Like, what is it like to make a sculpture that sells for like $5 million versus like some dude's loft who's mean? You know? Right. You know? So that was the kind of stuff I was doing. Like I was doing these like really beautiful like loft conversions and some interesting residential and some like cultural spaces and like, you know, white cube gallery type stuff. Like it was all cool projects, but I don't know, there's something about that I thought was really freeing and cool and interesting. I wanted to pursue. So
then you came to LA, and then
came to LA
as a visit, and then kind of stuck around.
Yeah, man. I mean, like it was really working for Doug. I mean, I also really liked it. I was kind of curious about it. I used to visit a lot when I lived in the Bay, but I'd come down and it's confusing. Like you just get in the car and then it's like you get out somewhere, you're like, I don't even know. You know, when you're younger, you're like, you don't connect the dots. But yeah, I mean, I think this is also like, I mean, you think about like the iPhone coming out and whenever in 2007, right? It just started to change where it became, I remember like the first time I came, I was actually at a wedding in Palm Springs, and I rented a car, and I had like this Avis map of LA, and it was like, there's like 5 lines on it, you know? It's like the 5 different freeways, and you're kind of like, you know, people would have to give you directions still. They'd be like, yeah, you know, it's like, you go get off of La Cienega, and you go here, and it's like, if you hit this street, you've gone too far, and it's kind of like, you just sort of like hone in on it. So you learn it a little bit, just kind of how it works, and then, but I think, I think that's when people like really, I just noticed people like really starting to move like a lot, because I feel like the threshold was removed, you know? It's like, it doesn't
being able to navigate.
Yeah, because when I moved there, people would be like, oh, after a year, it'll be fine. Like, you're going to not like it for a year. Because it's true, it's like hard to navigate, hard to figure out, hard to meet people. And
there's not a grid.
Yeah, or even just like, how do you like hang out? It's different, you know?
The thing that we found is odd is that, like, so coming from New York, it's well, I mean, New York, you learn to know the geography, like in the landscape, really, really well, because you're walking everywhere, it feels like. But here, it's just weird to me, and I still haven't gotten used to it. Of like, you just basically get in your car, you drive somewhere, then you pop out, and then you're at the location. And that disconnect that happens when you jump into your car is something I still can't quite get over. And maybe it just takes some getting used to, but it's such a like destination-based way of like understanding a city that it's peculiar. It's very peculiar to me. So like when people say, I have this feeling or opinion about Los Angeles, like for me, I can understand when someone says that about New York City or Brooklyn or Manhattan, because it's like a very continuous thing that you're in. But LA, I'm like, but do you mean you like the destinations you go to? Is that what you mean to say? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. There's so much, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, it's sort of like, I remember like being blown away by people's houses. Like you'd go to someone's house, like up in the hills, for example, and then you go through the gate and it's like this insane garden and all the uplighting, like the lights at night in your yard are so like, it's probably the best in the world. I would imagine. I remember just going to some dude's house. I was like, what? It's incredible. So that is like everyone's got their own little private sort of like Arcadia, you know, they sort of make for themselves. No, you know, might be huge, might be a little, whatever. But yeah, it's also like the speed and the texture. And I was, you know, you said about like just this disconnect when you get in your car and it's like some stuff happens and then you show up at your destination. It's like this Star Wars, like, you know, like warp drive or whatever. But it's, I don't know, like, cause I used to walk a lot when I moved here. And it doesn't look great. Like LA does not look like sexy when you're walking around
not really.
like Hollywood or like K-Town or something. You're just like, ugh. Cause it doesn't have to, because nobody sees it. It's like everyone's just like zooming by. So it's like at that speed, kind of like you see big shapes and color and stuff, you know, it's like it works. But when you stop and like look at a wall, it's probably gross, you know? I like cycling. I wish it was a little easier. I mean, it's fine, but
that's an interesting kind of pace to be at.
Yeah,
though,
it's good.
You know?
It's good. You still see a lot of texture, but then you kind of like doesn't take like 4 hours to like go somewhere. You know? Yeah, I try. Yeah, I remember like trying to walk somewhere when one of the first times I stayed here. I looked really close on the map, and it was just like 95 degrees out, and felt like I was gonna die.
So I know that you didn't really plan to move to LA, but still, when you came here though, and then end up staying, was there kind of like a culture shock going from? I mean, you're from California originally, anyway. San Francisco's or Bay Area is a different beast, but was it kind of like weird to go from New York, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and
100%.
and then come out here?
Oh yeah, I was like, I've made a horrible mistake. I mean, it was just so quiet. I was surprised for being such a big city, like how quiet it is, I guess. And that was the first thing that was really shocking. It's sort of like, I don't know, like in New York, you just sort of socialize all the time, or people always want to meet up and have dinner, and like that's just how you know, especially if you're young, you have like a horrible apartment. It's like you don't want to just like hang out there
you don't stay inside.
Yeah, you sort of go out and do stuff. But so yeah, it would be like Wednesday or something. I'm like, hey, is anyone around? You want to like do something? And it's just like go outside my place and it'd just be like nothing going on, you know. So that was a shock, first of all. But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing. It's like New York, I think, is kind of like, I guess if you think about it, it's like sort of empowering, like you are able to go anywhere and do anything, and like the grid is really easy to understand, and then you can kind of like just pop into some place and it's you have an experience, you can kind of piece it together on your own. It offers you a lot, but it's like LA, it's like this constant like treasure hunt where you're like uncovering things. I still drive around and find neighborhoods I've never been, like doing waves, I'll like take some weird turn, I'll be like, oh, this is like a whole cute little thing, you know. It's like that happens constantly still, so you can never like see it all, I think, which is something that's also sort of fascinating.
Yeah, it's maybe part of the allure of LA. So this funny thing is, so before the recording, we were talking back and forth to schedule it, and then we went on your website and there's like an eyeball or something.
Oh my God, yeah.
And like, this is highly conceptual, but it doesn't lead anywhere. I'm very confused.
Oh my God, does it work? Did you email me through that? It probably doesn't even work.
No, I think I emailed you through something else. It might work, I don't know.
It's a funny thing. We were just talking about this briefly. I think you were using the restroom, but you were like, oh, we're like doing our, you know, our like website. I've done so many websites, and I always am about to put it up, and then I have some weird thing where I don't think it's the right mix of projects, or there's something about it. Like my work is so broad that I feel like if I put it all up, it's just confusing, and people are like, what does this dude do? And like, did he do all of this? Is this like what is happening? And I don't know. It's like it's tricky. I have one right now that I just worked on that I'm not sure if I'm going to use it or not. It's like it's there. It's a full website. It's just not connected.
Wait, what's?
But you have to like buy the domain. You don't want someone else to like buy.
Right. Yeah. Of course. But what's potentially wrong with the one that's? You can move the mic out a little bit if it's just if it's uncomfortable.
No, it's cool. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with it. I think it's just sort of like, I always have this thing about like what to put forward and like what things to focus on. There's nothing wrong with it, I guess. I should probably put it up.
You could put it up and just see how you feel about it, I suppose. Yeah,
and it's also like I don't like maintaining them, you know. It's just sort of like, I guess it's not that hard. I'm like really complaining about stuff that everyone has to do. But I don't know. It's just I don't know why I have a thing with it. I think it's also like being like weird about self-promotion. Like I don't really post a lot of work stuff or like any hardly, you know. So
right.
I just all my work is like kind of word of mouth. So I think it's just about like having this fear of being self-aggrandizing and be like, oh, check out this like all this crazy shit. But you kind of have to do that if you want to have a business, of course.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, you do, I suppose. I honestly, for me, if I could have the ideal setting, like I wouldn't do any of that, and it would just be word of mouth, and I would just I like the work that we will hopefully do. I like just doing the work. You know? That's my like passion, my love. And I think the marketing question is like fascinating to me, and it's like a fun project in some aspects. But ideally, I would just like do the work and not worry about anything else. You know, and the marketing aspect is like super uncomfortable. I'm getting more comfortable with it, but the same. It's like I don't like this idea of promotion and also the way like the internet works and everyone's so you know, has such knee-jerk reactions. It's like the line between promotion that's sincere that people like versus promotion that everyone will hate is like something that still is elusive to me.
It's weird, right? Some people are really good at it.
And I'm very afraid of that line. And even then, I frequently cross it. And so it's like, I don't know.
Well, it's like dating too. I feel like you don't necessarily want to put all yourself out there, right? You kind of want to select what you're going to show once people reach out to you. No, seriously, right? So if you keep it completely blank and then you have people reaching out, well, you know, you get a feeling for maybe what you want to show them, what they're looking for.
Yeah.
But
I also have this thing, I mean, it's like a lot of the work I do is collaborative. So, you know, it might be like this huge project and I'm on this team, but I was like, I would like to share it because it was a lot of work, you know? But then it's like a concert tour. And like, I'm not the artist. I'm not the, you know, person that did the videos necessarily, like, you know, but we designed like all the stuff. So that for me is also a little tricky because some of my favorite stuff is something that's part, you know, it's collaborative and I feel weird putting it up. I know everyone, you know, it's obvious and people are like, yeah, of course, like you didn't, you know, do every little thing on it. But that to me is kind of problematic sometimes. Yeah. But then I'm like, well, if I take that thing out and this thing out and like, what do we have? We have this like other stuff and it's not all, you know what I mean? Like, and then it's like, do I put everything up? Do I put some of it up?
Well, I mean, here also in Tinseltown, everyone's so promoting so hardcore. I feel like, you know, that even if you're doing it, but you're at least a little bit aware of crossing the line, that you're probably still going to be doing it like less than okay compared to some of these people out there who are so aggressive.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
and it's also, you know, for, you know, the audience, I think it's, that's the main thing. So I just do such a range of things, I guess, you know? So it's, if someone wants me to do some creative direction for a motion piece, like they'll show up and then there's all this architecture stuff and it's like, it's confusing for them, but I don't know. I mean, I think people also, I have friends that are like, they don't care, like, like all they care about is like who you worked with and you just like put a client list and some photos and you're cool.
Interesting.
You know, and I've actually found that to be true a lot. I mean, at the end of the day, it's sort of like, can you do the work? There's a lot of people that can do the work. Do we like you? You know, is it, you know, do we like working together? Is the work good? And all that you learn after one project, but like getting your foot in the door and getting that project, I think is a really critical tipping point for that.
The client list is important because they, you know, they just name recognition kind of thing?
Kind of. It depends for the kind of clients, you know, like I think for people that are more discerning, they're maybe like in the fine art space. I do a lot of commercial work as well that probably like a lot more that's even in the thing I sent you. So they're sort of like, oh, you know, like we're working with a cool brand and we are a cool brand. We just want to make sure that you're work with other cool brands, you know, it's not, you know, I don't know. I don't think it's like a conflict of interest thing, but I think it's just more about like associations and whether or not they think you're on the level and doing good work with big people, I guess.
So for people listening, actually, how would you describe your title?
That's a great one. That's a great one. You know what's funny is I always lead with, I tell people I'm an architect sometimes, but it really bums out like actual architects that have their licenses and they're like not supposed to say that. But I think I'm like, I don't know, I'd say like I'm a architect and creative director. I think is what I put as like a one-line thing, you know, but yeah, I mean, I just do kind of like experiential design with like a focus on like multimedia driven spaces, I think.
That makes sense. I mean, the deck you sent us was, so I went through it, looked at all the stuff, and the first thing I said to Marina was like, I don't know what we're going to talk about, because there's so much to talk about, you know, and there's a lot of variety.
That's cool.
And I mean, my philosophy is like the more variety, the better.
I think so
and
too.
You know, the kind of conflict you're talking about of I have all this different stuff. Is it going to be confusing to people, or are people going to find it desirable or digestible or whatever? Is actually a similar thing that we have with specifically, let's say, with the podcast, because we do these interviews with guests, and then we have those come out every 2 weeks, but we have an episode or more every week. Right. So we flip-flop between a guest interview And then we do ones where it's just the two of us and we're totally like free forming and it's outrageous and, you know, not work appropriate. And then we do ones where we talk about like, yeah, we get in trouble for those.
I don't know.
And then we do ones that are like more serious, like helpful conversations for young architects trying to make it through, young designers making through professions, like, you know, things like that. And our concern has always been that, and I think it's true for some listeners, that they get to the show and they're like, what the fuck is this? Like on the one moment you're having an interview with someone, the next moment you're cursing and talking about eating Peeps and the sexuality of snacks and things and, you know, turn off, you know, screw you, what are you doing kind of thing. But I don't know, the variety is fun, so we do it.
I think so too. I mean, that's great. But yeah, in terms of the work, I mean, it's like, I definitely had a moment that was kind of an existential freak out where I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I should have just kept with the career that I had. Like, that was going great. And now I've just like devolved into doing like all this random shit. So it's, I don't know. I feel like I just like the more shit I did, like I realized that in itself is a strength to have this kind of like lateral ability to kind of just literally work on any kind of creative project at this point almost, you know. I can't really think of that much stuff I can't engage, but I mean, I just like yeah, I don't know, it's a really broad
so you've done
kind of thing that
you've done. Let's to maybe to list some things.
Yeah, let's do a list. So yeah, I did. So, you know, I went through the kind of the architecture thing. So I have a traditional architectural background, like tiny to very large scale buildings, and then you know, started working on this fine art stuff for this artist who primarily was doing like big installation work. So it was sort of like large scale sculptures, a lot of stuff with like sound and light based, you know, sort of like these pavilions. That's what he got me with. He was like, oh, I have, after that MoMA project, we got so much, you know, people interested in like, you know, so many people interested in doing these large scale things. We have these pavilions. There's one in Brazil. There's one over here. There's one here. And the pavilions were literally like, you know, you walk in, there's light that changes, or there's like an audio installation. And I was like, this is amazing. This is architecture with zero program and just pure sensation, you know. It's like, that to me was incredibly compelling. And then did that for a while. And then just being in LA, I started working on like live concert productions. I had a friend who was a fashion designer, and her friend needed someone that knew how to do CAD, and he was a big creative director. This guy Willa Perone. He was working with like Rihanna and Jay-Z and some other huge people at the time, Kanye also. So I came in, and he would, you know, we'd just sort of rap, and we'd, you know, be making shapes. So we'd like develop a bunch of, you know, like concepts and stuff for that. And so that led to a bunch of other things. And then once you're doing that, you're sort of like, okay, we have this whole design for the stage, but we need lights, we need visuals, we need video. And so then I started getting involved in the actual production of the content. And then that opens up a whole other can of worms about like, you know, doing creative direction for video, directing, you know, like finding editors and composers and all that stuff. So then you kind of open yourself up to like every aspect of media content creation. And
so at what point so how long have you been in LA now?
What year are we at? So
what are we?
11 years, yeah.
Okay.
Feels like longer. That's weird.
So at what point did that, like that final can of worms, as you kind of spoke, when did that happen? Was that a fairly recent thing? Or
it's been going on for a while. I think the concert stuff was probably maybe like 2012, let's say, to start working on it. And then I was pretty heavy in it for a few years. And then, I don't know. And then that was just a weird crossover with sort of music. And then I had friends who were working in fashion. So I kind of started doing a lot of stuff that was like related to fashion. But like it started as kind of like pop-ups and kind of like these very low budget sort of runway shows. And then they got much bigger budget runway shows and kind of growing with them and doing stuff. So I've done a ton of like retail design, which is still kind of like interior architecture, but I feel like it's very temporary. So it's sort of like you have a really cool, outrageous look for a store, but you don't, you know, it's going to be gone in like 3 years or something.
Right.
So
it's closer to maybe even stage design or something.
Yeah. So some sort of stuff like that. Yeah. And then it kind of like, I've done like accessories and things like it's that they want to like, oh, can you do like zipper pulls and these little like pieces of hardware and kind of like, so that, I mean, I think like the content stuff is probably the most recent, like maybe the past like 5 years or less even. Yeah.
So with the larger productions like concerts and things like that, you know, you kind of mentioned that you started off by looking at like the shapes on the stage and things, and that obviously you have to talk about lighting and then sound and then suddenly the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like You would think that the person who's in charge of the creative direction for the whole thing would have to have some kind of, not expertise, but knowledge of all these different aspects, right? But if you're, and so that's like kind of like the master view, I suppose. But if you're kind of coming up into it and you entered it through one aspect of like just the stage forms or whatever it might be, was it weird going through that process? And did you have other people saying like, well, like what makes you think that you have the, I don't know, skill set, the knowledge or whatever to give creative direction when I'm having to teach you a lot of things about these different things? Or are they pretty open to it? It's
pretty open. You know what I found out, I kind of realized after I'd been working for a while, is I think that he brought me in because I think there's a lot of people that don't even, like they draw kind of, you know, like they'll do some like models, but that's almost like on the production side, it's sort of like the artist. Before the stuff started happening, I think that the artist would have a concept, or she'd have some creative people on her team, and then they'd sort of like give, you know, like this like mood board sketchy thing to the production people, and they'd come back and they'd just like draw it up in CAD, and there's like truss everywhere, and it looks all chunky and weird, and you know, it's just sort of is what it is, because you're at the mercy of these people that have to break it down into like a million semi-trucks and like, you know, set it up and down every single night, you know, so. There are things you push up against, you know, you'll have an idea and they'll be like, well, we can't do that because, you know, you have to, you know, it has to fit in this thing, or, you know, we can't, you know, crane this in that kind of arena or whatever, you know, there's limitations to kind of what you can do. But if someone wants it enough, like we've done some really weird stuff where they've had to come up with some solutions because like the artist won't, you know, not do it, or you can only play a certain kind of venue, or, you know, it'll impact the tour. You'll have two versions of it, you know, have the big one and then kind of like small one, you know. But I think I was brought in because he understood that there were limitations in his studio at the time where he wasn't bringing it far enough. And so he was kind of at the mercy of these dudes with the CAD, you know? So he's like, well, if I can he's like, I know how it's built, you know, and I can be proactive about delivering better, you know, deliverables that are further along, better drawings, better, you know, more fleshed out things on our end. Then there's more of a conversation that can happen before it's too late, and there's going to be like, whatever, we have to put like a big thing in the middle to hold up your like circus tent or whatever, you know. So that was kind of where I came in, because in the beginning I would sort of, you know, do something and they'd be like, well, we can't do this and this, but we can do this one, that one doesn't work or whatever. So we'd be like, okay, sure. And then it became more of a conversation where like, we really want this one, let's figure out how to make it work, and we know kind of what the pieces are, so we can kind of, you know, do that. So yeah, that was fun and a good process.
And then like the music and lighting and all these other aspects, which have their own, you know, come from different professions entirely. Did you have like any other background in those things at all? Like music production, music making, or?
No, not really at all. I love music. Like when I was in college, I interned at a music magazine just because I liked music and I liked design. This is also before the architecture thing. I was like, well, I like design, I like music. So like a music magazine seemed like the intersection for that. I think it's just like, it's just anecdotal, like going to shows and seeing things, and it's supremely complicated, and these dudes are insane, like how fast they work. Not to take anything, it would be like, oh, I can light that show. It's not like that. Just the lighting directors are really wildly fast and capable, and some of these dudes are incredible. But it's the kind of thing where you know enough about it to kind of mess it up. You're like, oh, I want these fixtures, you know, and then they're like, oh, really? Why would you use that? So yeah, it's enough to like have a conversation about like what the fixtures are available and kind of know what things are out there to get the look. But yeah, always need those people. I would never be able to light a show by myself.
I mean, it sounds like architecture to me, just not a building. The same thing an architect does. We don't engineer anything. We don't.
Right. It's the same thing. You're like, you want it to look like this and be this shape, and yeah.
Make it that way. We have the budget.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was talking to someone else about that, like the level of drawings. Like when I was working, I don't know. I feel like a lot of this stuff is like fairly lightweight in terms of like I do drawing sets, you know, but they're like much simpler and kind of more straightforward than the stuff I would like a CD set for a building or something, you know. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I just feel like it's a lot of it is liability and like public records and health and safety and all that stuff, which we're not really beholden to in the live industry, you know, which is really cool. And it's just about like texture and shape and form.
Yeah.
And also you go around the back and it just looks like garbage. It's like, it's like literally taped together and like drywall screws and stuff. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that. You know, it's like, like, what do you need to accomplish? Like, how long is it there for? Like all that stuff is
so there's a fair amount of like, on the day of, fixes Band-Aids to just get it to work for this certain period of time and like, concerned
100%.
about it.
Or like any sort of like theater production that only has to run for a few days or something. It's like definitely looking shabby, like on the other side, you know, like it has to not fall apart. It has to be safe, of course, but, you know, it just only has to last that long. Or I do a lot of these activations. I'm doing air quotes, activations. Yeah, for brands. So we do these like kind of pop-up-y experience things that might have some kind of like interesting video component that's like a reactive video or some sort of, we call them gags. It just seems really unfair to call them that, but that's just like a term we use where it's like, oh, we could do this gag or that gag or whatever. Like the you know, we want some sort of unique experience that people can take away. And all that stuff has to just, you know, last for just long enough. Yeah. You know, we're like, is the paint going to chip off? Is the floor going to look like trash? Like, what are we?
It will, but it'll be day 3. So
yeah, exactly. You're like, what time is it going to be? Yeah. It'll make it. Yeah. It'll make it. Let's get the photos. Yeah. You know, get everyone through. And I think there's something cool about that. I think it's something kind of like liberating to know it's just going to be trashed and gone, you know.
Is that your favorite type of project out of those stage design ones?
Yeah, those are really fun. I you know, the music industry can be difficult. Like I kind of took a break a little bit, and it wasn't even about the work or the stress. It's just like, I don't know, there's a strange culture. It's like people can be really impatient and like I don't know. Maybe it was just the people I was working with at the time, but I was like, yeah, this is too much. But
like big personalities,
kind of. You know, there's just like a lot of you know, like the artists are sometimes like really checked out, and like their teams are crazy, and then there's the label. People like to change stuff at the last minute. They'll be like, oh, I haven't seen this. Let's just, you know, move this over here, like this. I don't know, just to change something and like have their hand on it. Everything's very last minute. You know. I don't know. That's fine. I was okay with it, but in the beginning, I was like, why? They're spending all this money like to change it last minute. Like we could have done something so much better. You know, that just happens. But I don't know what my favorite is right now. I think I've been doing and the stuff I've been doing most recently are the kind of like these brands. I've been designing these like or like we're doing the creative for these pop-ups in Japan for like, you know, it's not that sexy. It's like a skincare brand, but Japan, they just love but they love the new tech, you know. So there's like a robot arm that we like work with the engineer to like make it, you know, like draw things or like do something, you know what I mean? Like you just have that. They're like, what is out there? We have these like transparent screens that we're making weird content for that are choreographed with like stuff behind it that moves, and it's like, you know, this it's just being able to play with all that new technology is kind of fun. But yeah, I think like a really good show is pretty great. There's not much better than that.
Well, the event itself, I mean, the number of people that show up and things, that's pretty wild.
That's what that really interested me about it. I mean, it's like architecture is really impactful and incredible, and we love it still, no matter what. But it's the audience is different. You know, it's like I think the idea of doing a pop show that's actually has a ton of artistic merit is incredible. You know, and you can reach people, you know, some like 10-year-old in their room sees it, they're like, that's, you know, that idea is really cool to me. I think just being able to reach that many people as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think for a lot of, I mean, there's certainly iconic architecture, which is like the 0.1%, which, you know, has that same effect. But for the majority of it, it's, you know, your everyday stuff, and which is not to sound demeaning, but it has a significant impact, but in a more like a very quiet way and tacitly. It affects people, but people aren't really aware of it, right? But if you can have something that is much more, you know, consciously seen, I feel like that's a very powerful thing. And even if it lasts for only a few days or whatever, it stays with him for years, you know? Yeah.
But it's a big part of the performance too. You know, like you go see an artist for the music, but you go for the ultimate experience of the show. So that's, you know, like you said, your audience is there for that, and you're giving it to them. So I mean, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and there's this thing also, I don't know how many artists are really getting into it, but there's, you know, I've done stuff with artists where it's like a very small audience, and you can do something that's kind of like in the round, you know, so if it's like, you know, did this thing in the Brooklyn, or not the Brooklyn, sorry, the Armory in New York City, it's like a moment where the, you know, like the curtain drops and there's like a big thing around it, and you're able to like put people in the middle. But stuff like that, when you're able to kind of like subvert the normal like seating typology of an arena or something, you know, or like, you know, Colleen did that thing with the floating stage. Right. They were able to like to break all the attendance records, because normally you can't sell the whole 360 because there's something up at the end, you know. But he like sold every seat and the floor because it didn't touch the floor. Yeah. You know? That, you know, stuff like that I think is interesting, and kind of pushing like where you are in relationship to the artist, and when you're able to do that, it's pretty fun.
Is there some kind of like design process or philosophy that you recognize as being established that you have? So like if you get a new client for any kind of project, is there some kind of like a signature or something? Yeah, I suppose. Even process is a little too like specific, but like something that you would know is being the process to go through with them, to create all these different things. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it just depends per project. It's kind of a cop-out. You know, something I kind of struggled with too, or was not struggled with, but like worried about when I'm putting all this stuff together. I'm like, is it gonna seem coherent? You know, I guess when I flip through it and see it all together, it's sort of, to me, it makes sense, and there's some kind of through line. But all the different projects. Yeah, I mean, I can't say that there's any one way to get there. I think people, I mean, often I get a call from people, and they're like, we have this like really weird thing that we're trying to do, and your name came up a couple times, and like there's not like a shop that you go to do this thing that we're trying to do, but it's often something that is new that people are trying to put together that needs kind of like a composite team of specialists. Interesting. Which is a lot of what the art stuff was too. You know, it's we had this one project that was the sculptural concept that was just a cloud, like a fluffy cumulus cloud that floated and just in front of Rockefeller Center. I was just chilling right there. But I did this, ended up getting these scientists from JPL involved, these physicists, and you know, and I went in there to give this presentation. The guy was like, "Oh, I'll get some people to look at it," and he flew in guys from Southwest Research Institute and the East Coast, and all these dudes came into this meeting, and I'd photoshopped this cloud in front of this building. I'm like, you know. But that was such an incredible, that's it. And they're like, that's amazing. I'm like, can we make it? And they're like, I don't know, can we? And they get in this really heated discussion about, you know, geophysics and like thermal behavior of water particles and all this stuff. And we made prototype. It was incredible. But like that conversation and that pushing, you know, different people together to kind of create something that's maybe new. Like, is anything new? That's like one of those things. But people are like really want to make something new, and I get those calls sometimes. So those are good. That's pretty cool, actually. Yeah, because it's kind of like, okay, you know a lot about all this different stuff, and we could probably get the right people to figure it out. Did the cloud thing happen? Cloud thing did not happen in that form. I think, I don't know. I left his studio, so that there was a collector that wanted to put it in. They have a Herzog and de Meuron place up in the Napa Valley. That's like for the private collection. They've been building for like 15 years. So there's a plan to put it there, but I don't know if they actually built it. They built like the vault for all the equipment and stuff, and I kind of like laid the foundation for the infrastructure. But we did some prototypes of this place in Florida. It was like Fountain Company that does like the Bellagio and like stuff like that. And it was like created so much vapor that it was, because you have to get the density, and it's like this, it doesn't scale. Like that cloud's like 5 miles long, and it's like when you're in it, you can see through it. So it's kind of like, how do you know, without using chemicals, and you want it to be water. So, but it created so much vapor. It was just insane. It was really loud. And I was like, this is crazy. This is too much. It's really cool if you're way far away, but like if you're right next to it, it's kind of scary. So how big was it? It was like, there were like these really like cool, super, you know, like thin supports. It was, the actual infrastructure was probably like, you know, like 100 square feet or something. And it created, like, it would have shut down Fifth Avenue. It would have been like just mayhem. That would have been amazing. Yeah, it would have been cool, but it wouldn't have been fluffy. You're just sort of like in the mist. Yeah, right. It's like terrified. The horror movie. Yeah. Maybe for Halloween. Maybe your title could be something like something about like, I just do new stuff. I don't know, something like that. I heard a story that Buzz Aldrin, he has a I don't know if it's a true story, but he has a business card, and it just says astronaut, which I always thought was like fucking awesome. Like, there's no, just astronaut. That's astronaut. That's it. They're like, you know,
that's incredible. I love that. Yeah, and I don't know. I need something like that, because it's like what you were asking before. Like, how do you, like the elevator pitch or whatever? Be like, well, I do this, but I kind of like sort of like that, and blah blah blah. But when I was working in music, I was just doing creative direction for some of these music artists. Like, a lot of them were like rap based for whatever reason. So it was kind of like, I don't know, like I get in these meetings with like these like label people, because everyone's, you know, kind of claiming this creative director title right now. I feel like it doesn't really have a lot of weight, and like nobody really knows what it is, and it's like the sort of like Instagram me cool thing that people want to be a director, and they want to be creative, and be like, what are your skills? Like, what are we doing here? Was this like Pinterest? Like, what's happening?
Right.
So it's like it is. It's like it's sort of, it's like JPEG wars. You know, it's like you make these presentation decks to people, and it's like based on the merit of like whatever references you've chosen, and kind of like, can you put some stuff together? Like, you know, that's kind of the job. But yeah, I don't know. I was in a meeting. My buddy was like, yeah, when you say you're like an art, he's like, lead with architect. Like, that sounds super legit, you know, and then like whatever, you know, just like it's nice so people know that you have some sort of demonstrable skill that is fairly technical and cool. So I don't know. It's just not, I do get, you know, everything obviously is like focused on building stuff, you know, but lately it's like been kind of like more in the ether. But at the end of the day, it's like building weird, cool environments, you know, like I like it when it's, you know, yeah, the immersive stuff is great. Sound and light and space, you know.
Have you done a lot of things that were purely, I was gonna say virtual, that's not the right word, in the digital space, and they had no physical kind of presence? Yeah,
I've done some stuff. Like I did like this kind of early web app with Nike that was Arena. Like they did all this like motion capture for these athletes. I can't remember if it was for like World Cup or one Olympics or something, but did all this like really amazing, beautiful motion capture, and like had this app and a web portal to like put different clothes on them and interact, and there was some sort of like gamified thing. But the company that was doing all that stuff like built this really weird kind of dumpy arena. They're like, we just need like a really cool futuristic thing. Like, where is this happening? Is it like, it's not outer space? So they asked me to make a bunch of options for like, you know, kind of abstract futuristic sports spaces, which was really fun and cool. But yeah, I don't think that's live anymore. And then there was like yeah, then like weird animations. I'd like to do more, honestly. Like I've done a lot of meetings with VR companies where it's sort of this strange thing where it's a show and tell. They're like, here's the hardware and here's some stuff that people are making. Like the video game application is obvious, and then this and that, but it's sort of like, they're sort of like, what would you do with it? You know? But I don't really get a lot of commissions for like just purely virtual or digital space.
I mean, the augmented kind of headset, Oculus Rift, whatever, Hive is another one, right?
Yeah.
Thing is, it's weird to me because, like you said, the video game application is super clear. Yeah. But kind of beyond that, I mean, using it for like presentation purposes is clear, but beyond that, it's such an on and off thing that makes it difficult to maybe like to combine it with other things. Yeah. You know, and maybe some of these other kinds of technologies or professions and things are more easily blended with different stuff, and the headset and you have to wear it's kind of
I mean, I've used it. We've done like I do previs in VR sometimes for like a stage design or for a you know, just like a building. Honestly, like I have, you know, it's pretty easy to export it and give it to a client and have them kind of like walk through the space with it. So we do that sometimes depending on who the client is. I did a big AR thing last year or this year. Was it earlier this year? I guess it was like the beginning of this year, like this huge AR thing in Japan as well. So the whole project, like every surface was like this very like graphic thing, but then you like kind of everything would come to life and be like super animated, and you could like, you know, draw stuff in it. I don't know. It's funny. I remember someone on the project was like, AR is like so old. It's been around for years. And I'm like, yeah, but nobody wants to wear the headset. Like, I don't know. And you can actually walk around and you can, you know, it makes a lot of sense.
AR is so old.
It's like, you're like, why aren't we doing VR? I was like, I don't know. You're going to like walk everyone through the thing and like holding their hands. It's like, it doesn't work like that. I love all that stuff. Like I want to do like some sort of like a VR like haunted house or something. I don't know.
It'd be interesting. So what other projects are happening currently that are like?
Man, what are we doing? I'm not supposed to talk about some of them. Do you get this a lot?
Yeah.
On occasion, yeah.
I don't know. I've been doing these Premiere. My friend has a awesome boutique production company, so I've been kind of helping them a little bit with design for these premieres for a big company based in Cupertino. I'm not supposed to say their name, but they started making content recently. So they hire this this other production company to do their like A-list stuff, but we've been doing the kind of like slightly less A-list stuff. So that's been really cool just to work with them, and they want to do like kind of like reinvent the red carpet experience for premieres like that. So we're creating these kind of like weird immersive things that are linked into the narrative of the show and kind of like teasing stuff out like weeks in advance with like strange like communications.
Interesting.
And like bring that like kind of like a little tendril of the story like out to the people that are invited to that. So that all that stuff's been kind of fun.
But so the company or the studio that you work for or with is, what's the name of it?
The one I'm working with is Commonwealth Projects. They're sort of like they also do art production, and the guy Daniel who started that also makes these shirts. And he worked with Doug as well, so we met a long time ago working on that. But he's in this cool creative, like boutique creative production space, which is nice.
I don't know. I don't know anything about this world, but I've always kind of imagined that to undertake a project like the one you just mentioned, or any of these ones, like how many people do you have to have on staff to tackle this? Like,
it really depends. I mean, it can be
a lot of consulting.
Yeah, a lot of consulting. Yeah. So I mean, I've struggled with this too. It's like his studio is maybe like 6 to 10 people. Maybe, but they're not all working on the same things either. Right. So it's kind of like I've done it in the past, and I'm like I have a business currently that is just me mostly, and then I have some assistants that I bring in from time to time. But I kind of I feel like I'm basically a freelancer, so I tend to work with other freelancers and just kind of crew up for a project and have them be kind of atomized. I just never was able to. I started an office a few years ago with a producer friend, and I just would always stress out about like keeping everyone busy. Yeah. And not everyone can do everything. Like I can't expect everyone to be this kind of weird generalist, But that's challenging. Yeah, it's a really good question actually. So I've just found it easier to consult and kind of insert myself into other teams and just kind of do my thing that way. But for something like that, I mean, like the client company, of course, is massive. So they had a ton of people working on that. If we find like if we were ever needed to outsource something, they'd be like, oh, we want all these renderings, and we're like, well, we can only make so many. They're like, just give us the model then, and we'll just crank out a bunch. I'd be like, why aren't you guys doing them all? I don't know.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
So yeah, there's always that option, but
so yeah, really, your the specific role in these cases is like creative director.
Yeah,
and, you're setting the vision and
I see it done all sorts of different ways. Like I see the kind of like all-in-one, like soup to nuts production company that like will handle everything, and that can be really nice. I think it just really depends on the client. Like I also see clients spending so much money on production, and I think it's just for their kind of internal checks and balances. So they just want to make sure that they can email someone and like get a new 100-page deck like the next day of like all the new stuff if they want to see it. So that's what they're paying for. But I don't know if it makes the work any better. Right. I've definitely been on productions where it's like we're just doing like crazy busy work just to show them something that's going to change the next day. So it's like, give us like 3 days and then see where it's at.
Yeah, those kinds of projects are not fun. I mean, on the one hand, maybe it sounds like they'd be fun because you get to do a bunch of stuff, but it's kind of taxing, like emotionally. I've always felt like projects have a certain kind of lifespan and life to them, and if you fuck with it too much and you like do too many hardcore 180s, it like ruins the life of the project, and somehow like even the emotion of the people, the staff, somehow it gives off the wrong vibe, and now it's just
it's bad for morale.
It's not good for morale, and I think the project itself somehow ends up being weird too.
Yeah, for
or maybe that's just my perspective being in the trenches.
That's real. I mean, yeah, it's kind of, I think I touched on it earlier. It's like at the beginning, I remember like being like so personally offended when they didn't follow through with the thing that we've been working on or whatever, or like changed it or like go a different direction, and I'd be like, oh my god, how could you? But I just felt betrayed. But it's just like a constant, I mean, that's just part of it. It's like everything is like very much a problem solving endeavor, but I think with this stuff is like the main thing, you know, almost. It's like you have to always, it's like always changing. And I don't know, this last thing we did, they changed the venue 3 times in like a week and a half or something. And then like the budget's there, so it's kind of like, okay, we know we can do it, but then you're like, okay, if you don't, you know, pull the trigger on this thing now, then you can't have this or that, and we're gonna have to think of something else that works in this time frame that we can build. And, you know, so there's always like these things up in the air, you know, until it's built. It's like, you know, but sometimes they're like really down to the wire, like changing shit. Like they'll just, or they'll like, we'll build some huge thing and they'll see it, they'll be like, no, it's
that's crazy.
Like, oh, that's my thing.
Yeah, that's also crazy to think that there's that much cash to, you know, for things like this. It's
kind of crazy. You know, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I've been thinking about sustainability a lot, and just like what, you know, I have like an existential crisis every few years about like, what if I'm doing something that's positive for the world? Is it helping? Is it hurting? Whatever.
Right.
But yeah, it's a lot of waste, and you know, I don't know. I think it's tricky with the temporary space. You know, there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, I can understand that. I don't know. For me, the kind of the checks and balances, or like the goods and weighing up the goods and evils, is like, if something is super wasteful, you know, in terms of material and things like this, but it has like a lasting impression on like that kid or whoever, like that's, and hopefully it's a lot of kids, then it could be worth it. I mean, it's in a weird way, it's similar to like architecture, or any studios where they do a lot of physical model making. There's a lot of like wasted materials, right? There's like, you know, students shouldn't waste materials, office shouldn't waste materials. And it's of course that's the case. And if you look at like mathematically, you tally up all the pounds of cardboard and you're wasting stuff. But if it births something like totally innovative and new and can, you know, inspire, then that's where maybe the offset comes into play. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's just I don't have the answer, obviously, but I mean, it's in terms of like material waste and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff gets reused. You know, I'm even seeing like RFPs for proposals where they just want to talk about sustainability, but like build like a big wasteful thing to, you know, bring attention to it. You know? So yeah, it's a bit of a rabbit hole. You start pulling at the thread, and you're like, oh god, everything's wasteful and stuff. I think it's just being sensible about it, and like a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of the production stuff is reusable, like a lot of like the decking and all that stuff. And it has to be because it's like a standard, standardized stuff that people know how to work with like really quickly. So
how do you maintain like low stress levels? Maybe you don't, like during the final production hours and things. You know, because it's super tight, and then there's a debut date in a lot of these cases in all the cases for these types of things. So yeah, it's wild. It's I just lean on other people a lot, you know? I'm sort of like, I rinse my hands, I like wash my hands with it at some point, and I'm like, okay, you guys got to build it now. So you know, it's a little bit of that, but I think no, we're all in there together. Yeah, it's hard. I think at the end of the day, like I found a lot of artists or whoever is like really pushing to have like this one thing be perfect, and even if it's not perfect, like you kind of figure it out and go with it, you know, and you just like find a way around it. Like I've done a ton of shows also where there's like been no rehearsals, and the artist it's like it isn't around, and we like build this crazy thing, and I was like, is she gonna show up and like do this? Is there like a routine? Like she's seen this, right? You know, it's like this is some weird stuff like that where like the first couple shows are like sort of like live rehearsals a little bit. Wow.
And that is crazy and sketchy, but I don't know, it's showbiz, baby. I don't know. It's like, no one really knows at the end of the day also like what's supposed to happen. So even if something like doesn't, I've had like big things like not move when they're supposed to, and I'm like okay, nobody knows. Like, nobody knew that I was supposed to do anything. So that's kind of, you know, liberating just to have that with the audience. Like nobody has a clue like what they're about to say.
It's super interesting. Is there anything else that you haven't done yet that you want to do that you're thinking this would be a fun type of project?
Dream project. I don't know. Like I'd like to do more of like the fashion stuff. I think like the fashion show is like kind of like dusty, and I don't really know how to improve it. I just feel like they've just been doing the same thing for so long, and it gets like more lavish and crazy. You know, like Bureau Patak is this amazing production company that does like all this stuff, and something in that space. I think there's something there that's interesting, and I don't know.
Well, it seems. I mean, I'm really not very engaged in that world, so I probably shouldn't say. But it seems like the last X number of years that the engagement of the audience and the models have become or the separation between the models and the audience has become blurred. They're still very separated, but their teams seem to be physically more interweaved than they once used to be. Maybe I'm totally wrong on that, but that's my kind of feeling of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess it'd be interesting to see how far you can take that.
Right.
You know.
That's interesting. Yeah. No, I think it's happening a little bit, and it's also like, you know, with like the digital consumption of all that stuff. There's something there. I was also going to say, I don't know, like social spaces, like something. I don't know. I've been going, like, just went to this big hotel opening in West Hollywood, and it's sort of like just thinking about like where people go to hang out and interact. And, you know, like in New York, it's like restaurants or whatever. I don't know. Something that's like these big hospitality projects feel cool, and there's like a really big variety of programming and spaces, and something on that, in that direction would be really fun, I think, to make something that's like a bit of a like multifaceted, cool, multi-purpose space for working and hanging out, and maybe there's some hospitality and whatnot. That'd be cool. Like the co-working thing is weird. I don't know. It's cool, but
you mean like the WeWork kind of thing?
Yeah, like I've done some kind of like creative offices that aren't for co-working necessarily, but just like fun, open plan office spaces with different like fun meeting rooms and areas and whatever. Like I think like the way we you know, conduct work, the spaces we work in are kind of different. I don't know, retail for a long time was a cool thing that people are probably doing less of in the physical space. You know, like if you think about New York or like any sort of like major like city street, like the mixed use thing is sort of like, it's like shops, it's restaurants, it's bars, it's hotels, it's, you know, there's like not that huge of a list of like types of things that people are doing, you know. So you know, if there's like some kind of interstitial fuzzy area that can be sustainable, and you have to monetize it, I guess. But I don't know, like someone, you know, there's something to be done there.
That's an interesting thing too, because there's this idea that in all of the activities that people do in like more public areas, like in public streets and stuff, is all consumption now, and which like on the surface is easy to buy into. Like what do? We pay for food, we shop, and we pay for coffee at a cafe, and that's it. But then I was thinking the other day, like, but when did we not do that? I mean, like, exactly. what do you do if you go out like if you don't consume something? I mean, you could just walk around, but if you go to a place, you're gonna buy something or something, right? So
or sort of like this phenomenon of like, we're just like, you know, public park, like if, you know, Central Park versus like I'm getting these proposals for, you know, people that want to develop a space, and maybe it's a developer that's about to build something crazy on it, but then it's they want to have this interim thing, or like the Hudson Yards in New York or something. It's like people want to actively fabricate spectacle now, I think is the kind of a new condition. Which I'm, you know, down for. They always wanted fun stuff to do, I guess, in the public space, but I don't know. Like I would like to do more of these things that have, you know, I don't know what makes it more artistic and have a higher social value than something else. But I do get a lot of requests for Instagrammable moments, you know. I wish people would stop asking. I was like, it's going to look cool. Don't worry about it. You're going to want to take a picture. It's going to look sick.
They don't say Instagrammable moments, though, specifically.
Oh, they do, yeah.
Oh, they do? They actually
100%.
Okay.
100%. Oh, wow. Like, we want social engagement. Like, straight up. It's crazy. I was like, you guys aren't even trying to, you know, or like a, you know, like a museum of ice cream thing, which is not, I have not been to, but stuff like that. I don't know. Some of the proposals are pretty reachy, and I'm like, it's probably not for me. Thank you, but I don't know if that's really my jam.
Interesting, man. Well, look, we burned through almost an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we can chill out for a bit after this. But this was like super interesting, and I think it'd be really great to have you on, and we could have you on next week too, but like, you know, some period of time and see like what other crazy things you've done in that period. This was really fun.
Awesome, man. Thanks
cool,
so much
thanks for coming on. Yeah.
Cool.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you everyone for listening to this week's episode of the Midnight Charette, and shout out to our guest, Noah. I really enjoyed the chat with him. It was a different style than some of the other interviews and some of the other guests, but he's true to himself, and he had very interesting things to say. And I hope we get to chat with him again. And I hope he gets to make that cloud installation the one that was in front of Rockefeller Center. I hope that gets to happen.
Oh yeah.
Even if it does consume all of Manhattan, you know, like why not?
And he wears the mustache pretty well. So shout out to that. You know what? I met many people wearing mustache, and oftentimes it's questionable. He wears it pretty well.
Yes, it's true. This is true. And thanks for listening, of course. It means a lot to us. We're going to keep this going. It's amazing that we're up to 158 now episodes. We are on all the social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. What else? We were on Vero for a bit, but not anymore because their founder is kind of a creepy person. We're on YouTube. And we have a hotline, which is 213-222-6950. Call that number. You can leave a voicemail. It goes straight to voicemail. Ask us a question about design and architecture, or just share a story about, I don't know, your life, what foods you like, maybe what offices you favor, why work is going well or why work sucks. And we will play it on the podcast and then have a conversation around it. And lastly, leave us a review, right? If you think that what we're doing has some value, and you've been listening to us for some time, then show some support. Go into iTunes or the podcast app on your phone, on your iPhone, and leave us a review. And that would be right.
Well, I feel like I can retire now. I mean, you did it all by yourself. So it was an amazing career. Yeah. I am stopping at episode how much? 159? 58?
See, this is. Okay. I think that's it.
I am not retiring.
That's it for now, right?
That's it for now.
Okay, cool.
Stay tuned, more to come.
Yeah, next week we have an episode with the two of us, and I think we have one coming out about the exams coming out soon, right?
Yeah, we've been promising it, and we are working on it. It's just we don't want to make it too quick, so... It's going to be a lot of content. What are you saying? They don't know that.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, this is the Midnight. Thanks everyone for listening again, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.